What's going on, everybody? This is yours truly. I'm coming here with 4 tips that I believe every parent should know that will just make your kids love you. If you do these 4 things progressively, not maybe today or maybe not tomorrow, but in the long run, it will help you become a better parent, and also your children will thank you for it later. So these are my 4 tips that I believe every parent should at least know and apply these things. Number 1, you got to recognize your kids. What I mean by that is their goals, their achievement, anything that they've done, anything to do in school, anything to do with their friends. No, be present. Don't just have kids, but be present. Understand some of the things that they face, understand some of the things that they go through. As a parent, you have to realize that you have to be present in your kid's life. So just having a kid is not good enough. You actually got to raise your kids. So understand, be present, recognize your kids, their accomplishment verbally or sometimes through an action, through some of the things you do, their grades, if they're a part of any athletic events, if they have any artistic gene in them or tendencies. Recognize those things. I don't necessarily mean have a calendar of your children's life, but I do mean recognize them enough for them to know that you're present. Don't be the type of parents where a child is wondering whether you're there while they were growing or not. So number 1 tip every parent should at least know or do is recognize your kids. So number 2, believe in them. Believe in your children. As a parent, there's definitely some values and some principles you have to instill in your children. And I think the best way to do so is to believe that they can become somebody of value, somebody great, somebody who can add value to this world. So believe in your children and instill principles and values into them. There are what I call temporary values and principles you want to instill in your kids, and what I call some eternal long-term value. For example, some temporary values you can instill to them is in terms of encouraging them, show them kindness, display love to them, display affection to them, display what it means to be generous to others, display what it means to be respectful of others, display what it means to be somebody who cares about others. Some more eternal, long-term values and principles you have to instill in them. Some of your biblical values, some of your ethics, some of your philosophy on life, some of your philosophy on whether they will grow up, on marriage, on dating, on relationship as a whole. You have to be a parent who believe enough in your children to instill these things in them. So don't let that just be something that will catch on their way, but be something that you do intentionally. Sometimes you take some time, sit down with your children and they have one-on-one. They might be young, but keep instilling that in them. Have the one-on-one conversation, whether you're a dad with your daughters or your son, whether you're a mom with your daughters and your son, even if you're a single parent. I just want you to also understand that these values, these tips apply to you as well. 1, recognize your children. 2, believe in them. The first thing about instilling any type of value into a person, you have to understand that first you have to believe those values. You have to walk by those principles. It's going to be hard for you to teach something to someone you don't believe, and it's going to be hard for you to enforce those values or principles if they don't see you living by them, right? So 1, recognize your children. 2, believe in them. Number 3 tip that every parent should know would be challenge your kids. You have to be somebody, a parents who understand what it means to help your children grow, and they will grow through the challenge. You got to challenge your kids. You got to challenge them to do better. You have to challenge them to improve. You have to challenge them to become better people. One of the best ways to do that is parents, you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent in your manner of speech. You have to be consistent in your principles that we talked about in the second tip. You have to also be consistent in being present, right? So not being the type of person who vacillate between mood. You have so many mood swings that your children are like, well, I don't know how mom's gonna be today, right? Don't be the type of parents who are like, man, dad is today is mad, and they're gonna try to avoid you. So be consistent. It's good sometimes to raise your voice if you want to make a point, but don't be a parent that your children are not quite sure what to expect of you. When you challenge your kids, the best way to do so is for you to set a standard by which they know, okay, dad or mom or whoever your parental figure may be are expecting this out of me, right? So challenge them, reject passivity. So don't be a type of parents who is okay with apathy, who's okay with somebody not trying to amount to be anything in life. I know sometimes it might not be as easy to think about it now, but your children will thank you later if you challenge them, especially if you have a dream or a specific goal that you're trying to do, trying to point them in the right direction. Sometimes, as parents, you might think to yourself, well, I don't think my child is looking at this the right direction. Instead of just trying to tell them, no, don't do that, no, don't do this, help them understand why that may not be the right route and challenge them to push their limits in maybe discovering a different route, right? So challenge your children. Also, another thing that's really important, I think I said this in the first 2 or 3 tips, is be present. It's hard to challenge or to instill these values or recognize your children if you're not there. As parents, I'm kind of an old school. I believe in a husband should work, provide for the family, but I also do not believe that you should be a workaholic. What is it good to bring 6-7 figures at home every year, but your children don't recognize you because you didn't come to the soccer game, you weren't at the basketball game, you didn't go to the play, your children don't know you, right? At the end of the day, you're gonna be old, and then your children don't come visit because they never felt like you were there when they were young. So recognize, believe, challenge them. And the 4th tip, this is one of my personal favorite, is bring influencers home. Have you ever heard a saying, actions speak louder than words? Well, I have a different saying. Other people's action will either reinforce yours or nullify yours. What do I mean by that? As a parent, you always should be bringing people that exemplify the principles you're trying to instill in your children home so that they may consistently have examples of what you're talking about. If you're a person that talks a lot about respect, talked about a lot about caring and being generous to people, you should bring people home so that your children can see, yeah, dad is actually right because uncle this, because friend that, because auntie that exemplifies these values. Or yeah, dad's friends, or yeah, dad's colleague. They exemplify the same values that dad or mom are trying to teach. Right? So bring influencers, people that in your children's lives that can be able to see and say, okay, yeah, uncle, I can go to him when it comes to business. I can go to him when it comes to relationship. I can go to him when it comes to this, that. People who exemplify that. In my life when I was younger and still today, one of the great things my parents did is always bring a constant group of people who exemplified a lot of the things that my parents talked about. Influencers, that's all I call them, is because they influence what you as a parent do. So if you're a type of parent who want your kids to be disciplined, want your kids to go and get a higher education and finish college, get a PhD or whatever, but you have a lot of friends who don't go to school, don't really care about studying so much, it's going to be hard for you to influence or at least to reinforce those principles in your kids because they're going to say, well, dad, you don't really hang out with those type of people. Well, mom, I don't really see you applying the same principles. So bring influencers home, be really important. All right, these are the 4 tips I think that will completely explode your parenting skills, right? And by the way, I just want to say, I don't have any children, so don't get that mixed up, but I believe these principles would definitely help you because as a child, these are different things that I've seen fashioned in my life, and I've seen fashioned in the lives of many people. I've studied many people, I've asked many questions, and these are the 4, I combine them in like 4 great tips that I think every parent should know. 1, recognize your kids. Be present in their life, know their achievement of their goals. Number 2, believe in them, instill in them principles, instill in them values that they might be able to take, even whether temporary or for the long term. Number 3, challenge your kids. Help them to push their dreams, to chase after what they want. And number 3, always bring influencers home. People who will be able to reinforce indirectly or directly the principles and the values you stand on. I hope these tips have been valuable. Subscribe on the button below. Make sure you share this video to someone else who this may be a blessing to. And I'll see you guys later. See you. Give it one more chance. Give it one more chance. Give it one more chance.